Hood River, for a small town, has an amazing legacy, and the History Museum is what guards that and what preserves it.
Often history is lost as we go from generation to generation, and a museum is a place that preserves that for the next generation. There are pieces of Hood River that, from the past, that are really critical, that if we don't save somewhere, the future generations don't see. And as I see kids, they're focused on what's happening right now, and they often don't have a perspective on what got to now.
Well, your museum is neutral. It does not take sides in any battle, and it's going to show and introduce people to perhaps something they didn't know about or were trying to ignore.
A history museum in the Hood River one has done an excellent job of preserving Hood River County's heritage and what the special pieces were about Hood River County.
Well, the History Museum is very important. Any museum is important, and the History Museum here in Hood River is very important. It holds all of our past, not all of it, of course, but as much as we can capture. And we're always looking for new ways to capture these things.
It's important for visitors. We need to have a history museum that looks good, that's engaging, and that's modern enough that people will want to go and see it.
Francis Abston, born 1852, Mason County, Virginia. Now, I could start my story there, but to be honest, it wasn't much happened at that time.
When I go places, sometimes I like to visit cemeteries, and it's not on the dark side. It's more that there's there's a history in cemeteries, and often when you walk through them, like when I was back on the East Coast, you'd go back there, and there are a lot of graves from the 1500s and 1600s, and you always say to yourself, if these people could only talk, they'd have a story to tell. And that's exactly what the cemetery tales did, was bring those tales to life for people. And I think it's that's what the History Museum's about, is the history and the stories and the tales get buried with the generations and the people. And what the History Museum has done is find ways to bring those things to life, whether it be the artifacts in the museum or the cemetery tales or the Fruitopia suitcase program to bring to schools. So it's that connecting with the community on lots of levels.
Cemetery Tales is interesting because, wow, we have, I think, over 20,000 graves at our local cemetery, and let's put on the Cemetery Tales. And it has been a great success. People love to go hear different people acting out and portraying how those people lived in their time.
They write a script and tell about things that happened in the time in which they lived, and they'll dress in period clothing, and it's just a lot of fun.
So it'll be an ongoing event, and it is a good fundraiser for the museum as well.
One of the things I think is really engaging is the Japanese history. We have a number of folks here at school who of Japanese heritage, and I think that it's a great example of how we can preserve things that we didn't do too well, so that we do a better job of them in the future. And I think that tells some tales that are that celebrate Japanese history, but also are pretty sad in terms of how we treated different cultures at times. And that's one of those opportunities, by preserving those, that we have to learn how we should do it better in the future.
Hood River has an amazing legacy, and it's our obligation, it's our responsibility to preserve that legacy. So the facility that we have currently is really straining to preserve materials. Materials degrade over time if they're not preserved correctly.
It is time to build now. It's time to expand, and that's what we're doing. That was the promise they made to the people who donated these funds over the years.
You really have to consider preserving the artifacts, and so that they can be enjoyed and appreciated by future generations. And if they are destroyed and not properly taken care of, they won't have that. And so it's very important to have the proper kind of building. It may seem unimportant to you now, but the older you get, the more important the past becomes to you, and you realize
that the children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren need to know this. And it takes money, it takes time, and it takes effort to get it done.
The Pioneer Society, 100 years ago, or over 100 years ago now, started to collect all these materials because they thought it was so important for their children to have it. It's important that we make sure that it gets passed on to our children.
The Hood+River Museum has a large collection that's never been on exhibit because the space isn't available. So there comes a time when you outgrow the building that you're in, and you have to do something if you want to continue to preserve this history.
When people come here for various reasons, be it for the Wine Festival, be it for the Harvest Fest, be it for the Blossom Fest, they need to do lots of different things. And many of them are quite interested in our background and what's going on. Now, those people are spending money in this town, so we do bring in tourists, and we do have people who come specifically because a museum is something they like to visit.
There's a basic obligation that we have to our history, and we have such a rich and varied history. This is our chance to share it with the future. We can do something very simple now, which will result in both the present and our past being passed along to our future.
Some things you can't put a price on. You have to keep your history, and you can't let that go, and it doesn't matter what it costs or what the times are. Those are things you can't get back. And so I think the expansion plan seems sensible, it's important, and it needs to happen.
What we're really doing is choosing to preserve what was important to us and choosing to give this gift to our kids, and that says a lot about our values.
So think about us in all those ways, and be sure that you can think positively about helping the museum stay a functioning business.